Much more competitive environment.
Go for the subject where my heart starts racing.
I chose Claire. Is it Cambridge?
They loved what they were doing, and this showed.
Remember, he used to call exams exercises.
Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'll have a chill chat with my friend Michelangelo, who is a Cambridge graduate. Before we jump into the conversation, if you're applying to Cambridge soon or to any other university, then make sure to check out my university application package via the link in the description below. It contains my personal statement writing guide, a 24-page PDF with all my best tips on writing your personal statement or your motivation letter, in other words. It also contains a CV template based on my best performing CV to date. It's a very clean and simple template that you can use and fill in with your own information, as well as the reading list that I put together in order to prepare for my Cambridge interviews. The latter will come in handy especially if you're applying to modern and medieval languages or linguistics. So make sure to download them via the link in the description of this video. Make sure to like this video as well, and let's jump right back into the conversation. Michelangelo, could you present yourself a bit, what you did, what you studied, and...
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm Michelangelo. I come from the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. I'm, I think, 1 year older than you, but anyways, we were 1 year apart in Cambridge, and now we're both studying together at the Diplomatic Academy here in Vienna. When I was in Cambridge, I did, like you, modern medieval languages, although I did quite a different program, because I sort of split it with classics a bit. And then I stayed on an extra year for a master's in social anthropology. So yeah, that's my experience of Cambridge. I'm really glad to talk about Cambridge. The more the time passes, I feel, the more thinking back to those years, I sort of the good memories stay, and the worst memories sort of become more relative or fade. Yeah, I don't know whether you feel the same.
As time passes, Cambridge remains it has that aura of romanticism about it. Yeah. And back then we were insecure, we were, I don't know, at least I was. I was a bit unsure if I was in the right place, if yeah, I was trying to find my place there. But now, as I look back, I feel like it was perfect, the perfect thing to do.
And now we're trying to find our place in life, which is sometimes, I wouldn't say more daunting, but more dispersive, a sort of activity. And you realize that when you are in Cambridge, even though, at least for me, even though very often I wasn't sure, why am I doing this? Why am I actually spending all this time studying this? What exactly is it that I am doing? Still, afterwards we realized that it was quite a well-structured life that had a beginning and an end. And yeah, I think that moving outside of university experience, you sort of lose that structure.
Yeah. The problem with leaving is that your goal is no longer writing the next essay in 2 weeks or preparing for your exams. You're left without a goal in life, and you have to keep searching for it. Is that what we're doing here in Vienna?
I know. Yeah. I think it's part of the charm of the Cambridge bubble. I think this idea that Cambridge is a bubble. It's really the more I think about it, the more it's true in so many different ways, both positive and negative.
Yeah, so I've got some notes here to just make sure that we go through all the questions, you know, some stuff that is actually useful to you. We're not just talking banter about Cambridge and nothing useful. So why did you actually choose to study both modern languages and anthropology afterwards?
Oh, that's a good question. So originally I was thinking that I would study classics at university, because, you know, Latin, Greek were my passions since sort of middle school, since sort of age 13, I moved from Switzerland to the UK, and I really got into classics. But then, when it actually got to when I was 17, going on to 18, and decided to apply, I had been studying Russian for a while, and I felt that combining Russian literature with classics was the most interesting option. And since Cambridge offered me the opportunity to do this mixed course, that is, do modern medieval languages with one of the languages being a classical language, that is Latin, I decided to go for it. And then obviously studying Russian literature, getting acquainted with history and with politics, and going away to Kazakhstan during my year abroad, which was my third year of the bachelor's, I sort of got more interested in sort of studying Russian society, especially Siberia, due to personal connections I had with that part of the world. And so when the time came to decide what am I going to do after this degree, I decided to stay at Cambridge for anthropology. And I did a thesis about shamanism and the sort of links between politics and religion in southern Siberia, Buryatia. Yeah.
And how come you chose that topic? It seems to be like a very remote area, remote culture.
Yeah, I mean, throughout my studies, it has to do with who I am and what I find interesting. I always tried to go for the things that are far away. So classics was this passion for the very far away past and the origins of everything. And Russian as well was this passion for, understanding something that is far away, that is different, that is remote. And I always had this passion for maps and this image of Russia up far in the north, huge, sort of between Asia and Europe, really made it interesting, fascinating for me, and that's how I started learning the language. And then on the other side, it's also my mom and her work that really pushed me this way indirectly, because she had been interested in sort of esoteric traditions, meditation. She lived for a long time in Sri Lanka when she was younger. So a big part of her career has been dedicated to the study of these phenomena. And me, coming from a very different background, very academic, study of literature, classics, but having been exposed to this side of things, to this more new age approach to spirituality for a long time, I sort of came the time when I wanted to make sense of it on my own terms, more sort of academically, with links to the things that interested me, like politics and society and Russian history. And I sort of felt that doing a project on shamanism in Siberia sort of brought all this together. And I had this sort of relative advantage of having been to Siberia already and knowing the region, knowing the language, which not many people have. So.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because for me it was completely the opposite. I always tried to look into something that is close to me, to study further something that I feel close to, something that somehow fits my image of myself. And even when applying to Cambridge, someone gave me this piece of advice to go for the subject where my heart starts racing when I read the title of it and the subtopics. And it always happened with things that I had been doing for a long time and that I did all the time, which was studying languages and literature. And that's how I chose my topic. I just went on to do what I'd done for years and years, because my studies were very literature heavy in high school as well. I studied German up to a high level, because coming from Transylvania, it's a region where German is spoken there's a German-speaking minority, so I had this chance to study German quite thoroughly in school and high school. So it's somehow fit as part of my personality to go on and do German further.
But I remember now you tell me that you also had this passion, this interest for literature, and but when you were at Cambridge, it sort of shifted. So you went into this course at Cambridge, which is so literature heavy, but you ended the course being interested more in politics than literature. Is it Cambridge that sort of changed your mind, or maybe opened your mind to something else, or is it just a personal thing?
I think it's a combination. On the one hand, it's a personal thing that I'm always trying to find something to do which has repercussions in the real world, something that is not just conceptual, not just theoretical, but also is useful to some extent, or that I can relate to the real world. And at that point, after my first year, I was very disillusioned with the way literature was being studied. I'd always loved literature because of the way you can read some aspects of society's past in those works of literature. And so to me, literature is more like a historical document that shows something about the society when the book was written. That was my main interest in literature, and I put this idea in my personal statement as well, and I talked about it in the interviews as well. And then when we got there, somehow I couldn't make this link in the literature courses. Somehow the questions that I had to think about for my essays were always pointing in a different direction, and I feel like now in literature departments people are somehow trying to impose a modern view on all of this old literature, and it's that the literature is not being necessarily judged from the perspective of the time it was written in. And the fact that we have to judge writers and personalities and people we hear about in their own terms is an idea that I encountered in the history department, German history department, from my German history professor, Mr. Whaley, who then became a big influence on what I wanted to do further, and I chose him as the supervisor for my year abroad project, which I did on German foreign policy in the second half of the 20th century, and then further for my dissertation, which was on contemporary German politics. So it was basically this link with history that then led to contemporary history, that then led to international politics.
So you would say that the sort of the system in Cambridge allows you to sort of explore different areas. You don't have to stick to the subject you decide to study at the beginning, like you decide to come in to study German literature. Mm-hmm. You don't do just that, because I think there is this assumption that the American university system, the Scottish university system, they allow you quite a lot of flexibility. You go in, you choose a subject, but you can also try out others, and you can change completely through your degree. Whilst there's this idea that in Cambridge, you choose one subject, and that's the thing you'll be studying the whole 3 or 4 years of your bachelor's.
Yeah, but I think that's a misconception, because after the first year, which is a bit more fixed, there's a lot of opportunity for choosing what area you want to focus on and specialize on.
And it's not just with programs like mine, because I said I managed to officially mix classics and modern languages together. But even within that, at the end of the day, I started with Latin, but since the course allowed me to take any paper in the classics faculty, then I ended up doing more ancient Greek philosophy than I did anything else. And that, to me too, was probably the biggest intellectual sort of influence that I got, maybe in my life, but definitely the biggest, the way in which my bachelor's in Cambridge changed my way of thinking the most was through the study of ancient philosophy, which was not what I originally had come to study in Cambridge at all. So I think that it's really cool the way in which studying at Cambridge, and the way in which you're constantly pushed towards developing your own idea, putting them down in writing, reading widely, broadly, and critically, really allows you to get to know the way in which you think and space yourself out amongst the disciplines in a very personalized way, at least in the humanities it's like that.
Yeah, I mean, we can only speak about humanities and social sciences. I wanted to ask you about your choice of college. How come you chose, because we went to the same college, we went to Clare College, and how did you choose it?
It was quite random. I mean, I'd never been to Cambridge before. I knew I wanted like a historical college, because if you come to live in Cambridge, you want to experience the beauty of the place, and even though later I discovered that even colleges that are a bit outside of the center and that are a bit newer offer better facilities, better rooms often, they've got loads to offer as well. But back then, sort of, I had this idea that I want to experience an old college on the river. But then the reason I chose Clare was, first of all, because some of the best scholars that teach Russian literature were based at Clare. And to be honest, that's, I'd say, with hindsight, it's a good reason to choose a college only partially, because, yeah, it's true that I had these professors doing my interview, for example, and I was able to meet them, at formal at times and stuff like that. But then the teaching, the supervisions, they're organized by your college, but with professors that are also in other colleges or at the faculty, so it doesn't have quite a lot of bearing on your educational experience. On the other hand, yeah, well, I at the end of the day, I chose Clare. The most banal reason I actually chose Clare for was that I was doing my year abroad, not year abroad, but gap year back then. So I wasn't in the UK, I was in Switzerland, and Clare was the only college that for MML didn't require any written work to be submitted for the application. No? And since I didn't have access to my teachers back at school anymore, I was like, it's too much of a fuss. I'll just apply to this one college. It's a stupid reason, and I wouldn't advise anybody to do it. But in the indifference of the moment, I really had no idea what to go for. I said, let's just do it that way. Yeah.
The way I chose it was because it seemed to be a friendly college, and it said explicitly that it was very welcoming to musicians. And back then, and even now, I mean, music is important to me, but back then it was a core component of my identity, and I thought I have to go to a college where I'll be able to play guitar in my room, and that was very important to me. And the fact that it said explicitly that musicians are very welcome led me to consider it, and it's also very central. It turned out to be a very friendly place to be in. Also, the people there were most of the time very friendly and very nice.
I mean, there is this preconception, I think, that whichever college you end up going to, you'll end up loving it. And that's, I mean, it's true to the point that, if you have good experiences and meet friendly people somewhere, you're always going to have good memories of it. And the educational experiences should be the same for all colleges. One thing that I would say that is important when choosing your college is the fact that your director of studies is from the college. And I think that for the classic side of my course, that played quite a big role, because I had the friendliest director of studies, no, Charlie Weiss, whether you came across him. He's quite a character at Clare. He's the pre-lecturer, I think. Yeah. Like
Yes.
long hair, American.
Yeah, I lived on the same staircase as him.
There you go. He's what a guy. I remember he used to call exams exercises, and this is the sort of guy that makes you very, very relaxed and makes you feel glad that you're at that college and that you have him taking care of who's going to supervise you, of mock exams, that sort of stuff, if you've got them. Because then I know from other people, for example, doing law, for example, Clare is apparently a very competitive college on the law side, perhaps because the master that we had back then was a lawyer himself, Lord Grabiner, and some of them were really a bit overwhelmed by the pressure, by the competitiveness. So I think that in that sense, the Cambridge experience can really vary. There is so much of the course you spend with individual professors, do the supervisions and all these some very one-to-one or small group teaching, which I find absolutely fantastic. But if you don't have the right people, so the people that push you the right way, or that are supportive, that are sensitive to your psychological and academic needs, then it can turn out a bit sort of not ideal.
Yeah, it's definitely a very challenging studying environment, and that support is needed. But I only ever had very supportive directors of studies in all of my years, and I've never met anyone who just didn't like their job or just hated students or something. There was never this impression. I always felt like they loved what they were doing, and this showed in how much care they showed towards us. I'm not sure how it is for other colleges, but for ours it was.
I must say that for my bachelor's, I also had this experience of really feeling super supported by every single supervisor I had. When I got to master's, then I came across a supervisor to whom I'm immensely grateful right now, my principal supervisor for the master's, who is a senior professor of anthropology, so someone who's like eternally and fully dedicated to the subject, loves anthropology to the core, super knowledgeable, and very, very supportive of students, but she really wants students to excel, and she brings students to this high level of writing and academic dedication by really pushing students. I had supervisions where she said no, she just read the first sentence of an essay that I had written, and she said no, rewrite everything again, or like going over and over the wording of certain sentences again and again. The sort of level of micromanagement that back at the time when I was doing my master's, and that's tells a lot about myself, and maybe the fact that especially back then I didn't really have the psychological means to deal with criticism, and that can be quite dangerous with Cambridge, because there's loads of people that get into Cambridge having excelled at school, having rarely been criticized at school, and then they get into a much more competitive environment where at Cambridge there's always the possibility of doing better, I feel. And some people struggle in this environment because they've never been criticized. They all of a sudden they realize that they actually need to work for something, and partially that was my feeling as well. My writing is something that I never question. I've always worked on my language skills, reading. I've always read a lot, but I never thought deeply about the way I wrote. And this constant work with such an intense personality as a supervisor who really wanted me to excel, but by changing and working hard was a bit upsetting, and I went into a bit of a crisis, got through it, and now I'm so grateful that I had this person as a supervisor, because I really learned a lot. So I think that one thing to keep in mind is that you go to Cambridge for a challenge, and I feel that sooner or later, unless you're super lucky or you're stupid enough to stay for a master's, sooner or later this challenge is gonna find you, and if you actually manage to work through it and improve as academically, personally, psychological, whatnot, then it really pays off.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a great asset to be able to make a distinction between yourself and your writing. It's something that I'm sometimes trying to do on my own, to look detached at what I'm making, be it videos or text or essays, papers. But it's very, very difficult. And if you've got someone who can push you to be able to look analytically and critically at your own writing, I think this is a very great achievement in terms of the professor as well, and in terms of the student as well. Even though the relationship, as you explained, is very tensioned for most of the time when you work together. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the supervisions. They're always marketed as being the biggest the biggest selling point of Cambridge, or the best, or the most particular thing that happens at Cambridge, being the one-on-one or two-on-one supervisions. How do you feel about supervisions? Or
so supervisions is basically 50 minutes, normally, at least for the humanities and social sciences, 50 minutes time slots where you meet with an academic, and you prepare normally by writing essays on a selected topic, question, with normally a bibliography, sort of academic writing that you have to read. Then you write an essay for this supervision, and you meet and you discuss your writing together with a supervisor and one or two other students, although personally many of my supervisions were one-on-one with the professor. Looking back at Cambridge now, I really realize what a huge thing supervisions were. I mean, having had now experience in other universities where supervisions aren't a thing, where you're just going to seminars and lectures, I realized that they really make the Cambridge experience something completely different from any other university experience. Obviously, when I first arrived into my bachelor's, I didn't think much of them, because I didn't have the experience of any other university, and I was coming directly from school where you work with teachers quite a lot. You're quite fond, so it's very different from just going to lectures where you're just taking your notes and then you go home and write a paper on your own. It didn't feel that special back then at Cambridge. Just feel I've got homework, and then my teacher is gonna tell me off if I did something bad, and
there was an element of that, of feeling like you have to do your homework, at least reading. I mean, yeah, you had to hand in an essay for every supervision, but I think reading widely was actually more important in order to face the challenge of the supervision, because sometimes you got asked questions and you had to come up with a good answer to them, especially if you're one-on-one. Most of the time I was there were two of us with the professor, so sometimes I could like pass on the question to my colleague, but most of the time, yeah, there felt a bit of a pressure, like in an exam, and it was every week or every 2 weeks, which is very motivating for you to study during the entire term. And yeah, you might think that a Cambridge term is short, 8 weeks, but you're actually engaged for that entire time, specifically because of the supervisions.
Yeah, yeah, they make everything super fast-paced because you have to read for the lectures and at the same time write for the supervisions, and this extra element of having to sit down and write. I mean, for me, it was like 3,000-4,000 words at least every week. That became more when I was doing my masters, but. Yeah, I think I agree with you that reading widely is super important for supervisions, and they're good because they actually get you to do the reading, because then you're like face to face with the teacher and he's asking you a question or she's asking you a question and you have to have a reply. I mean, you don't have to, but it's nice if you do. But when I went into my master's and into my postgraduate education, I realized how important the writing part is, because this thing that you're actually not just reading, not just learning about the subject, but learning how to write in a specific subject and reply in written form to academic questions using specific academic writing really teaches you what the job of an academic is, which is essential. When you go into postgraduate studies, the stuff that you're going to be doing is not exams or just chatting with professors. You have to write papers. No, that's what academics do. Write papers, theses, doctoral dissertations. And I realize from my experience in other universities that loads of people finish their bachelors not knowing how to write properly. And I think that, especially if you have the right supervisors, Cambridge solves this problem, because you have to write so much, and there's so much focus on writing and ordering your ideas in written form and expressing them, that it's really useful.
Yeah, that's true. Cambridge has made me a lot more meticulous about how I'm writing things in the essays, and we'll come back to that. I just wanted to say that actually my experience of the supervisions the first time in my first year at Cambridge was actually mind-blowing almost, because I had never had, coming from Romania, the educational system is made in such a way that you don't have so many contact hours one-on-one with your teachers. You're just part of a classroom up to the end, up to the finals, and usually, like, I was lucky we were 16 in our classroom because we were studying German, and it was something a bit more special, but most people do like 30 in a class or 35 people in a class, and you basically don't get to ask your own questions too much. You just go with the flow. And when I got to Cambridge and I realized that I could actually have an actual conversation with a professor who is an expert on their subject about the topic, it was life-changing. Also the fact that they were listening and valuing your arguments in a way that I'd never experienced before. Before I had to basically learn what others had written, and for literature especially, learn the pre-made commentaries that we found and created by taking stuff from books, from what the professor said, and somehow compiling them and memorizing them all for the finals. And to some extent, yeah, that process of memorizing taught me to express myself more beautifully in Romanian, for example. Then, yeah, there were some benefits to that, but it definitely didn't foster free and critical and analytical thinking. And it's as if we weren't allowed to do that because we weren't experts. And in the UK, it's completely the opposite. What you have to do is, with the amount of information you have, which is obviously limited, you have to argue for your own position and try to uphold that. And in the supervision, sometimes it became like a little debate between you and the professor if you had a differing opinion, and especially if you have a very particular opinion on a subject, it's an even better motivation for you to read more, so that you have more and better arguments for what you want to say. Of course, at that level, there's always a temptation to have preconceived ideas and try to prove them, because that's what you think a priori, and then you try to prove that point and find your arguments, and it's not the most scientific way of going about it. For me it was something very different, and that helped me get out of the bubble of the Romanian education, which makes you feel like you don't matter and your opinion doesn't matter.
Which is not really a bubble. I mean, I think it's the norm, at least in continental Europe. It's more of the educational system is more like learn a lot of content and then regurgitate, which is, I think, quite good in giving people a good basic knowledge, a broad knowledge, but not so good at fostering, as you say, critical thinking. And I think that that's a difference that goes on into university in Europe. That's something to consider for people who are thinking whether to stay in continental Europe or go to Britain, to the US for university. I think that the Anglo-American system has much more of a focus on this critical thinking. So short lectures, you learn the content on your own, and then a big focus on original thinking and using the knowledge that you know in new ways. And I mean, if you are motivated in your subject enough to want to go to Cambridge and dedicate 3 years of your life to it, then I mean, I think that the Anglo-American system is better suited, because you're going to learn this stuff anyway. You're going to research and read and gather the knowledge anyways. But it's this chance of expressing your opinion that really makes the difference.
And I also think it prepares you better for life, because when you're in a situation where you have to talk about this stuff, you are always ready to create an argument on the spot. Whereas when you're learning stuff as it is given, if you don't have the chance to start where you started learning and end where you ended learning, then if you are not in this fixed setting of doing the exam or writing the paper, then you are unable to speak about the subject, because you only regurgitated stuff that you can only give back the same way. You can't mix and match and make connections, and I think there's a big emphasis on making connections between various ideas and various things you know about in the UK system. But coming back to writing, did you feel that there was a difference in writing for humanities, for modern and medieval languages, compared to the social sciences, to anthropology?
Definitely. I don't know whether it's a rule for all of the humanities, but I definitely felt that in classics, but especially modern medieval languages, there isn't such a focus on sort of technical writing for the discipline itself. No, you're reading literature, you're thinking about it from many different aspects, and so you don't really become an expert in any field. No, I felt like, I was bringing in a bit of anthropology, a bit of sociology, a bit of literary interpretation, history into every little essay that I wrote.
Psychoanalysis.
So much psychoanalysis. And then when I moved on to my master's in social anthropology, and perhaps this is also because it was sort of more advanced level, it was a postgraduate degree, but definitely the focus was much more on writing within your discipline. So getting a very good grasp of the main arguments within the discipline and disciplining your writing to a scientific style, no, of avoiding flowery language, citations had to be given always in certain, when making certain claims, and very formulaic, much more formulaic way of writing, of formulating questions. There was a big focus on that, which really helped me afterwards, especially now that we're studying international relations, political science, to give a sort of a recognizable form to my thinking and my writing. But I sort of missed, and I still miss the more philosophical way in which I could write when I was doing, MML. The very, sometimes perhaps even self-indulgent, but still curious and always creative way in which I could think about texts and ideas doing modern medieval languages. Yeah.
When I came here, I definitely felt like writing in the social sciences is, as you said, a lot more formulaic, but I also felt like it was something that I was looking for. Again, in school, it was all about the flowery language. It was appreciated. And then when I went to Cambridge, this tendency to always use flowery language to make it more beautiful, in the detriment of the arguments, made me progress very slowly in learning how to write academically. And the fact that the nature of humanities and modern and medieval languages was so that it wasn't very strict on how you write, it also allowed me to have this very long progression towards writing more academically, which I only got to be able to do now after 1 year of master's in a social sciences subject. And I feel like the humanities could benefit quite a lot from associating themselves a bit more with the social sciences and the social sciences way of thinking.
And vice versa, I would say.
Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to stay tuned for part 2 of this conversation. Or if part 2 is already out when you're watching this video, then make sure to check out the next part of the conversation, and make sure to download my university application package linked in the description below. I'll get you in my next one. Bye bye!